Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us launch our IP Innovation Chatbot officially into the online world. I am super excited today, and we're so happy that so many of you are joining us from around the world. Now, you're in for a treat today as we get to celebrate what is possible when we dream and collaborate together with talented and aspiring minds. Yes, this happens even in a pandemic. I'm Professor Pina D'Agostino, and I'm the founder and director of IP Osgoode and the Innovation Clinic. And our clinic has really been the driving force behind today's AI-powered innovation. Now, here I would like to extend a special welcome to my Innovation Clinic students who are all attending. And today's event will be recorded. It's also live closed captioned, and the link is already available and it's being streamed on the Osgoode YouTube channel. And a recording will also be posted on our website following the event. Now, to all of you in our audience, thank you for joining. Please feel free to post questions in the Q&A. We made sure to leave some time for you after our panel discussion. And as always, please tweet away, #IPOS Innovation Clinic. Now, there's so many of you who've worked together to make today possible, and a particular trailblazer who deserves a standout mention is the amazing Maya Medeiros, partner at Norton Rose Fulbright Canada, and our team of lawyers and technical experts, including Anthony DeFacitas and Al Hounsell, who, along with our very own superstar Osgoode JD student Ryan Wong, will together do a demo run of the chatbot. So that's part of the lineup that we have for you today. Now, the chatbot would not be possible without the funds from Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada. Thank you so much, ISED. And this was really pursuant to its National IP Strategy Program. This was a visionary program which recognized that innovation must also be nurtured from the grassroots, and look to our own IP Innovation Clinic for inspiration. And I'm so delighted that in our panel, we'll have one of ISED's Director Generals, Jennifer Miller, and also the Canadian Intellectual Properties Office Interim CEO, Santinos Yorgaras. Now, supporting us from the very beginning has been my home base, York University, and in particular, the VPRI's office, which is a gem of an office in our university. And it recognized that faculty and student innovation champions also need their own champions. And we'll be hearing from one champion at the very top, VPRI Dr. Amir Asif shortly. Now, to organize events such as today's requires a logistical force, and thanks go to Ola Senishin, Ashley Moniz, and Emma Abbas for all of the exceptional organizing and vital help to IP Osgoode and the clinic. Clinic coordinators Jared Suez and Ryan Wong have been fantastic. Big thanks also go to Deanna Tosto and Braden Root McKeag from the OCE, now the Ontario Centers for Innovation, for their awesome promo help. We have a record number of registrants today, and I couldn't be more pleased. Osgoode JD student Bonnie Hassanzadeh will be writing a blog on today's event, and it'll be posted on the IP Osgoode website. Stay tuned to all that. IP Osgoode, which for me has been a labor of love. I founded it back in 2008. And it's the university's flagship IP and technology program. And from the very beginning, our goal was to inject many more diverse voices to the IP debates, not only here in Canada, but around the world, and build closer bridges within the IP community. And really our goal at the base has always been to intensify the learning opportunities for our students and our community. And today's launch is really a case in point of all that. I'm very proud of today's innovation, which is the latest addition to our growing list of groundbreaking initiatives, and it's really a mouthful here. There's a long laundry list of things we've been up to, from our blog, the IPALOG, our hackathons, our Bracing for Impact AI conference and webinar series, our IP intensive program, and so much more. Check out iposgoode.ca for all of that. Can say, I guess, that the chatbot is really the newest offspring of the IP Innovation Clinic, which I started back in 2010. And this was just 2 years after we launched IP Osgoode. and it's really the first legal clinic of its kind. I founded this legal clinic because of my own story from the grassroots and seeing the need to help. I had law students, and this would happen even on almost on a daily basis at one point. They would come into my office and they would speak to me, and they craved that real world, hands-on, practical experience with clients while they were in school, not when they graduated. I saw other resource-strapped student inventors borrowing in their labs, putting in all the hard work, but robbed of their dreams of growing the next big, socially responsible Canadian company because they didn't have the funds, they didn't have the know-how, they didn't have the support, they didn't even know where to go to get the help they needed to protect their inventions. Some of them didn't even know they had something to protect their valuable intellectual property. And here, I have to say, as a professor, although tempting, I won't go into why we need to protect our IP. That's another class. Through my research, I saw also at the time, and still very much the case, that Canada is a country with so much talent and potential, yet still playing catch up to other countries' patent filing, startups, and scale-ups from their valuable IP. So what did I do? Well, I rolled up my sleeves and I founded the IP Innovation Clinic to do my own small part to help bring so many more into the innovation fold. And did they come? I'm so proud that the Ontario Centres of Excellence, now the Ontario Centres of Innovation, were our founding partners. And for the years to follow, we've been working together and helping their clients. And I'm so pleased to say that Claudia Krivyak will be on our panel today. We have also been helping clients from various Ontario government ministries, and I'm delighted that several leading representatives from the Ontario government are with us today in our audience. Thank you so much for joining. And we've helped many more clients from across Canada. We've even had one client from as far as British Columbia. And over the years, many lawyers have lent countless pro bono hours to supervise and teach our JD students and directly help clients. And here I'm grateful to our founding law firm's partners. First, we had Torrey's LLP on board for several years, and now we're working with 3 leading law firms: Norton, Rose, Fulbright Canada, Braskin and Parr, and Own Innovation. And this really is a testament of all the hard work that we're doing and how the IP bar is very much behind us. And just to put it in context, and this is something that surprised me somewhat lately, is we've been crunching the latest numbers of all the work that we've done on the IP Innovation Clinic. And it's really amazing when we estimate the value of the legal work that we have been providing pro bono as a clinic since the beginning. It's close to $2 million. This accounts for over 6,000 hours of pro bono work. And it's been incredible, because since 2010, when we started the clinic, I'm so proud to also say that we've had the success stories. And Nikita Iliushkin, co-founder and CEO of Skygauge, is one of our A+ clients. And we will shine the spotlight on him today, and deservedly so, who landed a $3.3 million funding and did so during a pandemic. So now we fast forward 10 years from when I started the clinic, and really we're in a brave new world. Yes, we're in a pandemic. We still have under-resourced students, entrepreneurs, and members of the public who need access to timely, effective, and authoritative information, especially in the age of the internet. And I'm sure you'll all agree with me that there's so much noise out there and fake news. So we seized on the possibilities of AI and the reality that there are indeed many smart but repeat questions. And there are only so many times we can keep repeating ourselves. So ultimately, with the pandemic, how do we continue to innovate in society in periods of isolation? And so the IP Innovation Chatbot is that resource to help, and we can't wait to showcase it. Now, before we dive in, I'm very grateful to introduce you to York University's Vice President, Research and Innovation, VPRI Dr. Amir Asif. He is one of our fearless leaders and an engineer by training, and having previously served As founding chair of York's Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, and founding dean of the Gina Cody School of Engineering and Computer Science at Concordia, he is a founder and inventor himself, and we could not ask for anyone better to lead us and speak to us today and deliver the university's opening remarks. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Amir Asif.
Thank you very much, Professor D'Agostino. Bon après-midi, mesdames et messieurs. Good day, everyone. It is indeed my pleasure to be here with you virtually at the IP Innovation Clinic ChatBot launch. Welcome all to York University. A special welcome to guests from Norton Rose Fulbright LLP and government representatives participating in the panel discussion on navigating the IP innovation ecosystem. I'd like to present the land acknowledgement now. As this meeting is virtual and we are not all gathered in the same space, I recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you're currently on. We ask that if this is the case, you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been taken care by Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lakes region. York is a leading international teaching and research university and a driving force for positive change. Empowered by a welcoming and diverse community with a uniquely global perspective, we are preparing our students for the long-term career and personal success. We combine groundbreaking scholarship with renowned strengths in community engaged and industry partnered research for maximum social and economic impact. Indeed, York is an exceptionally diverse community working together to tackle complex societal challenges. Key areas of future work include digital interconnectivity and physical mobility of people, which offer limitless possibilities to collaborate and problem solve, and technology, which is enabling, enhancing, and disrupting every sphere of life and work, as well as revolutionizing how we all learn, think, and create. Artificial intelligence, or AI, in society is one of our key strategic areas identified in a strategic research plan. So, from smartphones that order our morning coffee to the remote calibration of computers in the outer reaches of our galaxy, AI pervades almost every aspect of our life. York will continue to soar to the forefront in visual perception technologies, space exploration, robotics and manufacturing technologies, remote sensing, intelligent information system, and cognitive analytics over the next 5 years. Building on a unique niche, we will do so alongside global intellectual leaders in the humanities, social sciences, health, and law who are laying new ground, expounding the moral, ethical, and legal implications of AI adoption. Today, we are here to celebrate IP Osgoode's Innovation Clinic. This is playing a key role in Canada's innovation ecosystem and very much aligned with York's vision on innovation and artificial intelligence and society. This IP legal clinic, founded and directed by Professor Pina D'Agostino, is a needs-based innovation to society clinic operated in collaboration with Innovation York, Norton Rose Fulbright Canada LLP, Bearskin and Parr LLP, and Own Innovation. As Pina previously mentioned, the Innovation Clinic is the first Canadian IP legal clinic of its kind, established in partnership with the Ontario Centres of Excellence, now the Ontario Centres of Innovation, and an international law firm in 2010. The Innovation Clinic is the largest IP legal clinic operating in Canada today. The clinic is staffed by student volunteers from Osgoode Law School who are supervised by lawyers from Norton Fulbright Canada LLP and Bergeron and Parr LLP. Through this hands-on practical experience, Innovation Clinic Fellows learn about common early-stage IP and business law issues facing actors in the innovation ecosystem. Which brings us to today, the IP Innovation Clinic Chatbot launch. We're here to showcase the IP Innovation Chatbot and the partnerships, collaborations that YORKU and Osgoode have gathered over this exciting new initiative. Under the leadership of Professor Pina, in collaboration with Maya Medeiros and Anthony D. Fesicus, partners at Norton Fulbright LLP, and the legal supervisors for the Innovation Clinic, with the assistance of technical experts in the legal technology group at Norton Rose, the IP Osgoode Innovation Clinic developed a publicly accessible IP Innovation Chatbot. The IP Innovation Chatbot provides free access to credible IP information in a timely, effective, and user-friendly way to foster greater innovation in Canadian society. Startups, entrepreneurs, and innovators need IP information, but don't always have the necessary funds and resources. The IP Innovation Chatbot will alleviate some expenses and make vital IP information more accessible. We are grateful for the funding assistance of Innovation Science and Economic Development, ISED, that was instrumental to develop the IP Innovation Chatbot. This project supports the Canadian government's national IP strategy to increase IP awareness and education by making IP advice more accessible. This, in my view, is an excellent example of the benefits of collaborating and supporting our partners to set up successful commercial ventures to change the world for the better. Welcome again and have a wonderful time. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, VPRI, Dr. Amir, Asif. We're so grateful for you being our champion and always elevating the rigor of York University's research and innovation to benefit Canada and the world. At this point, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Terry Sachlos, Assistant Professor at the Lassonde School of Engineering and Associate Director of the BEST Lab, Bergeron Entrepreneurs Science in Technology program. Now, Dr. Sachlos works very closely with our IP Innovation Clinic and sends many aspiring students our way, including our homegrown Nikita Iliushkin. So Dr. Sachlos, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It is my great pleasure to introduce Nikita Iliushkin, the CEO of Skygauge. I've had the privilege of working with Nikita since 2015, when he first joined the BEST Lab as a passionate and wide-eyed undergraduate business student, eager to practice what he was learning at the Schulich School of Business. Like all successful entrepreneurs in the making, he had a crazy idea, which quickly crashed and burned. But he didn't give up. He quickly picked himself up. He learned from his failure and teamed up with a talented mechanical engineering student from the Lassonde School of Engineering, who was also working in the BEST Lab. Little did they know at the time that they would forge an incredible bond based on the simple vision of building a next generation drone and ultimately plant the seed for Skygauge. It was a perfect match. Nikita was tasked with identifying the market and starting up the business, and Lennar inventing and building the dream drone. But like all student entrepreneurs, they lacked the resources to realize their common dream. We at the BEST Lab, the in-house entrepreneurship program at the Lassonde School of Engineering, were more than happy to help Nikita and Lennar in the early days by giving them a space to build their drone, access to the machine shop, prototyping facilities, ample pitching advice, and the most critical of all, free caffeine brewing facilities. When the first prototype drone finally arrived, made from wood, plastic, and glue, it was obvious they were onto something big. And that's when Nikita's team was referred to the trailblazing Professor Pina D'Agostino and her IP Innovation Clinic team, who could work their magic and help them file their first patent application for free. Yes, free. In doing so, the Innovation Clinic created the fertile bed from which Skygauge could grow and raise over $3 million in the midst of a global pandemic lockdown. Skygauge's story epitomizes what can be done when students and faculty from multiple disciplines like engineering, business, and law come together on an entrepreneurial university campus to change the world for the better. I will pass it on now to Nikita to tell you more about how his company is changing the world. Please join me in welcoming Nikita.
That was an amazing introduction, Terry. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. And we wouldn't be here without the support of really York University, namely the Best Lab, IP Osgoode, and the Schulich School of Business as well. I will give you a brief overview as to what we're doing and where we're going as a company and the journey in between there as well. So we are Skygauge Robotics. I'm Nikita Iliushkin, the CEO and co-founder, and we are building the drone for any inspection. As I'm sure you've seen, places like refineries, offshore platforms, ships and bridges, they make and transport the goods that we use every single day. But the problem is these are large metal structures and they get corroded over time, so they need to be inspected. So today, inspectors have to go up on ropes and scaffolding to perform ultrasonic-based inspections. So the same way a doctor uses ultrasound to see inside of people, inspectors use this ultrasound to see inside of metals. And they're measuring the metal wall thickness. And they do this so that when the wall gets too thin, imagine like a pipe or a storage container, they know it needs to be maintained. And today, this work requires workers to go up on ropes and scaffolding to do this. This takes days to complete, costs tens of thousands of dollars, and puts workers' lives at risk because they have to perform this work at height on these very, very tall and wide metal structures. And in the event that they can't do it with ropes, they have to do it with scaffolding, which is even worse because you essentially have to build a building around your building to inspect it, and poses additional monumental costs and additional workers to put at height. So what we've done is we have reinvented the drone to perform this type of work, completing it in hours, not days, much more cost effectively, and most importantly, safer, because these workers can stay on the ground. Our key differentiator is whereas most drones are only doing visual inspection with cameras, we are able to actually precisely contact the surface and take these ultrasonic-based readings. And most drones today are not capable of doing this type of functionality because they're actually fundamentally unstable when they fly. This is because they operate by tilting the entire body to move in the direction that they want to go. To solve these stability problems, we had to reinvent the drone. So our drone, it flies by only tilting the rotors to move while the center body remains stable. There's a bit of a typo there, sorry. And this was patented with the help and aid of IP Osgoode's innovation program. This was instrumental in our early days because we did not have the capital or means or bandwidth to file like a patent. And having the support of organizations like this was instrumental in terms of closing our most recent funding round, because we had found out the fact that we had an IP under our belt in a very competitive space, which is the drone market. It was a huge differentiator for us and was instrumental in helping us raise our most recent funding round. And so far, we have taken this concept and we have made it into a flying prototype, which we have tested on our customers and with our customers on their sites. And beyond this, in the future, we could do more complicated maneuvers like moving while maintaining contact with the surface. And the drone can also hover at any angle, and this is ideal for inspecting sloped and curved surfaces. But the most exciting part about this company, I believe, is really in the future as to where we're going. Inspection is the first use case of our technology, and then from there, we plan to branch out into pressure washing and cleaning, grinding, sanding, drilling, painting, and all manners of construction, maintenance, and general work. Our vision here is to really take this platform and create a drone workforce in the sky. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to go into more details about our journey and how we got here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nikita. Now, if we were live together, we would all be giving you a round of applause. You're amazing. And I have to say, Nikita is also a super nice guy and so generous of his time as the CEO of the company. So important from a governance perspective, but even just all the events that we've done, we've loved to showcase Skygauge, and he's come with Lenar on his team, and I have to say the drones always stole the show. So thank you, Nikita. We keep wishing you future successes to come. So well done. So now,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So now the chatbot moment we've been waiting for. I'm pleased to pass the floor to the amazing Maya Medeiros, partner at Norton Rose Fulbright Canada, and one of the leading architects behind the chatbot. And Maya will introduce our chatbot team, who will do a demo run. And so Maya, take it away. Please join me in welcoming Maya. Maya's going to be introducing our demo run speakers and running through the chatbot.
Thank you, Pina. And it was great to see Nikita's demo, and I'm so proud of Skygauge and all that him and his team have accomplished. So great job. And it's also my pleasure to introduce Al. Al is a trailblazing innovation lawyer at Norton Rose Fulbright Canada. His team builds innovative solutions for our clients, and with the hope to make life easier for clients, providing automation and efficiency and cost savings. And based on these tools, his team won Best Use of Technology in a law firm at the 2020 Canadian Law Awards. So again, it's remarkable to see the stuff they're doing. And Ryan has been doing a great job leading the IP Osgoode student team to help build and test the chatbot, working with Al and his team. And so the testing process was really great to see, and we're now looking to upgrade it with the team. So enjoy the demo.
Thanks, Maya. I'll just share my screen. I have a few slides. Before we jump right into the demo, we wanted to give a bit of a background to what is a chatbot, how is it built, and how does it fall within the broader idea of AI as it exists in legal right now. So I want to start by talking about what are the types of AI that exist in legal. And we could start with a distinction between strong AI and weak AI. Strong AI being where computers are thinking at a level that meets or surpasses humans, computers engaging in abstract reasoning and thinking. And right off the bat, we can say strong AI does not exist. It doesn't exist in legal. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world. We do not yet have Skynet, though we do have Skygauge. The only types of AI we have fall within this weak AI category, which is rules-based or pattern-based AI. And so I want to talk about each of those and how both of those are involved in the construction of a chatbot. So let's start with the logic and rules-based AI. This type of AI is where we have a predefined process or system or logical rules that are defined within the AI tool. And then those rules go into creating the output that the user receives from the tool. So how that works in legal is you've got a subject matter expert who understands a transaction or a legal process or some kind of a system of rules within legal. And they take their knowledge and we code those into rules within the system that then allow you to get to a legal decision or some kind of a rules-based output. Usually what happens is the user is led through some type of an interview process, and then you get to a solution at the end. There's a whole bunch of examples of this type of AI that we're building a lot of at Norton Rose now for our clients. types of AI that do analysis and advice, where we codify regulations or policies or procedures in order to provide a self-help tool for our clients. So I want to know whether I can send a particular commercial electronic message or not. I just go into the tool, type in some aspects about that message, and it'll tell me whether I violate anti-spam laws. Tools that do intake and assessment that help us triage our clients' questions are another case of rules-based AI. Document automation is exploding right now. We're doing tons of work like this for clients, where not only are we drafting documents now, we're actually taking it a step further and automating it so that users at the company who are not legally trained, they're not legal users, they're able to go through a simple questionnaire and generate an entire package of contracts and documents that are ready for the world. And then lastly, workflow automation. In the past year, we've been doing a lot of custom workflow portals for clients that, again, take the legal knowledge and legal understanding of our lawyers and package it into a tool that makes the process of legal service delivery a whole lot more efficient and enjoyable. The second category is this pattern or machine learning based AI. And this is where the AI tool finds and infers rules from patterns that it looks at within data. So we feed it a whole bunch of data and a whole bunch of examples, and the tool infers the rules based on the patterns that it finds. These patterns help us with predicting future outcomes, automating certain aspects, and they can also be trained as we provide them with more and more examples. A bunch of examples of this in the legal world right now are due diligence tools, where we feed in a bunch of contracts and it's able to extract clauses. Analytics and prediction, where you feed in aspects of a case, aspects of the judge, aspects of other previous case law, and the tool is able to make a prediction about how the judge might rule in that particular case. E-discovery tools, where we feed in documents and we can extract relevant information to a particular litigation. And then lastly, conversational legal assistance, where the majority of what a legal assistant does through these chatbot conversations is based on pattern-based AI. And so let's jump into chatbots now. What is the overall structure of a chatbot? Well, it actually uses both types of AI, pattern-based and rules-based. The majority is pattern-based, and the two concepts within a chatbot tool that fall within this pattern-based category are what are called intents and entities. And Ryan's going to get into some more detail about how we used these in the Osgoode chatbot. What is an intent? An intent is basically the goal or the concept that a user has in asking a question. So what does the user intend to get out of their question? And this is important because there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can ask the same question. I could say something like, what is the temperature? Or I could also say, how warm is it? And I'm getting at the same thing, but asking in completely different ways. So you need lots of examples in order to match intents. The second component is entities. This is also relevant to pattern-based AI. And an entity is what modifies the intent. So if I ask, what is the temperature? The tool can't really get at an answer unless I modify it with the entity of location. And I ask, what is the temperature in Florida? Which is probably a lot better than what is the temperature in Ontario right now. And then the last component is dialogue. And this is more along the lines of rules-based AI. And that's where we're able to create a branching conversational flow that follows predefined rules in order to guide the user through the conversation. So if the user just asks something like, what is the temperature? A dialogue rule might define that conversation such that the user would be asked a second question. What location are you referring to, or where are you, in order for the chatbot to arrive at a correct answer? And so all of this goes into producing a chatbot, and you're looking at the dialogue of the Osgoode chatbot right now, which Ryan's going to get into a little more in his demo of the tool. And so I want to pass it over to Ryan, who's been awesome in just leading up and heading up the charge at Osgoode in terms of building our intents, our entities, and our dialogue in the chatbot.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Al, for the floor, and thank you, Maya, for the introduction earlier. Before I get into the demo, I'm going to speak briefly about the process we take to develop and update the IP Innovation Clinic chatbot. And I figured to divide up the process into 3 stages. The first stage is developing the question bank. These questions come from a variety of sources, including our own client experiences with the Innovation Clinic. Our clients are typically entrepreneurs and innovators, and we find that they share generally the same concerns and ask similar questions. So we always try to find and build those questions in the chatbot first. We also use and draw inspiration from other sources on the internet like SIPO and WIPO databases, where they have those frequently asked questions on their sites. In this way, we're trying to broaden the set of questions to cover our basis. Once we have our question bank, and as Al has mentioned before, we build the questions into the chatbot as intents. We then add approximately 5 to 10 alternative questions to train the chatbot to better understand what the intent is really about and what the question is asking for. The last thing we do is testing. We get our students to go through the questions and we tell them to do 2 things. 1, to test the specific intents and make sure they work properly. And 2, to creatively ask the same question in as many ways as possible. The testing phases really rely on diversity of thoughts, if you will, to help improve the chatbot and hopefully capture the unique ways a person can ask the intent or question that we built in. Overall, the team goes through 3 phases of this type of iterative testing to gain feedback for the chatbot. Now, I do apologize because that is a very brief overview of our process. If you want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out. But we're going to switch gears now to do a bit of a demo of how the chatbot performs. So I'm going to be asking Emma to help me out here. Emma, would you be able to share the screen? Perfect, thank you. Through this demo, I figured to create a persona to help guide us through. So we have an inventor that has an idea they would like to patent and commercialize for market entry. They're familiar with some surface level IP knowledge, but not enough to be sure what exactly they need and how they can get their idea protected. This inventor finds the IP Osgoode website through an online search, as many of our clients do, and sees the chatbot featured and decides to try it out. The first question they might ask is, what is a patent? Oh. Great. So the chatbot here gives the definition for a patent, which is a grant of a right to exclude others. And then the next question might be, why should I get a patent? A patent protects your ideas and gives the owner an absolute monopoly. For an inventor, they're trying to figure out the commercial aspects of getting a patent. And so in this case, they'll likely start thinking about things like, what should I consider before getting a patent? The chatbot answers with first to file, the 1-year grace period, and also that patents are expensive to acquire. For many considering commercializing their patent, one of the questions they always ask is, how much does a patent cost? This is a question we frequently get as Innovation Clinic fellows as well, and I'm sure most of our students can attest to that. Now that they've weighed their commercial prospects and they decided that they should proceed with a patent, they'll finally ask the question, how do I file for a patent? Here we get the answer to direct them to the SIPO office, a suggestion to work with a lawyer to draft the application, and also a link to apply for a patent. You probably noticed that many of our answers include a link. And the reason we have these is obviously to give our users more information, but also to help direct them to credible sources like SIPO and WIPO pages, which many of our links go to. We hope to expand on this in the future and lead more of our users to government pages. The great thing about having a chatbot is it'll continue to grow. We already have a new set of questions to add to our chatbot that will cover more IP questions and subject areas. So really, the more data we put into the chatbot, the more it will learn and develop over time and become better as we go. Before I end my talk, I want to make sure to recognize my fellow students on the chatbot team, Rachel Marcus, Megan Carlin, and Daniel Joseph, and Francis Arias. These are students that have been helping us with all the chatbot testing and giving us the necessary feedback that we need to make the chatbot work. With that said, thank you so much for listening. I'll pass it back to Al for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Ryan. I just want to close very briefly with where we see all of this stuff going. It's been great building this chatbot, working together with Osgoode on this. But what are some of the things that we see happening in the legal tech industry as more and more of these AI tools are coming to the marketplace? Well, the first thing is that AI tools are becoming a lot more user-friendly. More and more, you don't need a coding background or a professional coding background in order to build some of these tools. And most of the people involved with this chatbot, which was built upon the IBM Watson platform, did not have any official coding backgrounds. The second is that client-facing AI is now blurring the lines between legal service delivery and software development. More and more, we have clients that are coming to us saying, we don't just want legal service delivery. We don't just want the legal answer. We want you to bake that into a technical solution that solves our problem end to end. And we're seeing that line being blurred more and more as law firms are brought more and more into this realm of software development. And lastly, AI tools are getting better and better. You know, this chatbot that Osgoode has built is really great for answering a lot of questions, but the beauty of it is that it's just going to get better and better. The more people are asking it questions, the more we see how it's answering, the more feedback that goes into it, it's only going to get smarter. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for watching this demo, and I want to pass it on to the next person.
All right. Thank you so much, Al and Ryan. You were incredible. That was an amazing presentation. And I know my phone's been lit up with messages saying how outstanding you were, and also to see the chatbot in action. We're so grateful also to all of the army of students behind the chatbot for all of your hard work. And as Al and Ryan said, please do ask Isaac many questions so it can get smarter. So now I'm looking at the time, and I'm so pleased that we're also ahead of schedule. We're doing great on time. And now is a fun panel discussion that we have for you. And it's on navigating the IP innovation ecosystem with a distinguished group of experts, and a chance for also you to ask questions in the Q&A after the panel discussion. And I'm pleased to say that moderating our panel is one of the world's leading and naturally intelligent IP experts. And that's our Osgoode's very own Professor David Baver, Professor of Intellectual Property Law. So thank you so much, Professor Baver, for moderating today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pina. Well, I have an easy job today, just to ask a few questions and make sure that I stop talking and everybody else stops talking in time. I was very impressed with the demonstration of the chatbot, and we've got lots of questions that we have to put towards to a panel, which is an expert panel in many ways. I won't introduce them all. I think you've already had an introduction of them, but only when I will say something about them very briefly as I ask them. But I think what I'd like to do now is just go through a number of questions and see what people have to respond in quite short compass in relation to them. So let me start with something quite general. Well, I guess I should start with the chief here, the chief boss, Professor D'Agostino. I'm going to ask all of you on the panel, so you can prepare as you wish, to say something about your organization, how you support or are involved in the IP innovation ecosystem, and how do you foresee using the chatbot? And I think that's a really good question to put to the person who's behind it all. So over to you, Pina.
Great, thank you, Professor Weber. And if we could also ask the panelists to just turn on their cameras so that everyone, we'll try and replicate the terrestrial experience as much as possible. So, okay, great. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks for that question. I think I already alluded to a lot of what I've done in my opening remarks, so I won't take too long. And just to really reiterate that I think when I reflect back, really all of the essence, everything that I do is really circled around the theme to really support the IP innovation ecosystem. And this is through, anything from my teaching, my research, my scholarship, my speaking engagements, and really most importantly is through my actions in building programs from ground zero. So I think that's something that I'm good at and I really love, and to do that with partners and collaborators and within Canada and around the world. And I feel that I'm in a really privileged position and a privileged vantage point being in the university. And that's the beauty of being in the university for me, which I think is really at the core of a lot of what we're doing and to solve like the big world problems, because the university for me is a place where ideas flourish and it's a safe space to think. It has to be that. And really the creativity and the teaching really starts from here, and inculcating that in the next generation and being ready for whatever emergent technology comes our way, right? Now we're in the era of the weak AI. When we get to strong AI or who knows whatever else is out there, we'll be able to manage, because ultimately we're doing that with together in that safe space and bringing many minds to the table. So for my dream is to really, for as many people as possible to use the chatbot. So we're going to be continue working on it with our awesome team at Norton Rose Fulbright and our students, and really to make it as smart as possible to help people, because there is a lot of noise out there. I mentioned there's a lot of fake news, and we want to make sure we're that authoritative, easy to find source of information.
Good, thank you very much. Nice and brief, and I'm sure all our panelists are going to be nice and brief. Just a couple of minutes each then. We've already seen and heard from Maya Medeiros, so I'm going to call on her again. She's going to do a lot of talking today, I can see. Maya, who's the partner at Norton Rose Fulbright. Maya, just the general question, just tell us a little bit about your firm, how you support or are involved in the IP innovation ecosystem, and how do you foresee the chatbots being used?
Thank you, Professor Weber. I'm a lawyer and patent agent at Norton Rose, and I'm similarly privileged, like Pina, to be part of a leading global law firm, not only excelling in legal services, but also innovators. And so I'm very, very lucky there to work with Al and his team. And I'm an expert advisor on IP strategy and patents. So I help contribute that expert service to the innovation ecosystem. I also work as an expert with AI technology and looking at its related ethical considerations, which is something that we see more and more coming up. So that's something I'm very interested in. And I would like to keep continuing to develop the chatbot and its knowledge base and concepts. So working with Ryan and the student team to keep finding credible sources of data and knowledge, but also those that are readily accessible as well. So something that we're looking at is for open data sources, leveraging legal frameworks that facilitate sharing of knowledge. So Creative Commons licenses are these standard licenses avoid custom licenses, so it helps us easily build the chatbot's knowledge base. So it's been an interesting exercise working with Ryan and the team. We're looking to add content, so we're also looking at organizations such as the Center for International Governance and Innovation, CG, given they have so much great content and it's a Canadian content creator, and so things like that. And so that's where we're looking to keep developing its knowledge base, and that's how I come in as a legal expert.
Thank you, Maya. That's terrific. Nikita, well, you already told us a bit about yourself, and we've seen the wonderful machine. I was just wondering how if the chatbot had been around when you were starting all of this, do you think you would have made use of it, and how would you have done it, if so?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially early on in a company, as like a business owner, you have to do so many things, whether it's like selling, doing day-to-day, like just operations, all the other things that kind of come across your desk, and go, because essentially as an entrepreneur, most of the time you have absolutely zero experience in this domain. And going from zero to at least a moderate level of competence, like it's very, very difficult to just get even like a basic framework and understanding of even what questions you should be asking. And having something like this is that kind of first introductory step, is definitely kind of where I see a platform like this happening, because you have to just invest so much time, because you're not going to be, most of the time, you're not going to be paying someone else to do it. You have to do it yourself because, you know, limited amount of resources. And then that would require a massive, massive time investment to like get a ballpark grasp of everything. And having a platform like this would be like essential in terms of leapfrogging that amount of time and knowledge required to at least get a foundational knowledge in like patents and how you should be planning yourself accordingly.
Yes, I can see that. That's. I was just thinking of myself trying to enter into the engineering field, and with the enormous amount of engineering knowledge I have, how I would fare in that area. And I think the answer would be pretty miserably. So it's not my field, and I can see how an engineer and somebody particularly interested in computers, you're immersed in that. But why on earth should you know anything about law or IP law? This I think would be a very good entry point for you. Well, I'm delighted to be able to now ask somebody who really ought to know everything about IP, Konstantinos Georgaris, who is the CEO of the Canadian Intellectual Property Office and Commissioner of Patents, and a whole lot of other things as well that involved at CIPO. Konstantinos, delighted that you're able to be here with us, and perhaps you could just say a little bit about your organization for sort of CIPO for engineers, as it were, and how you are involved in the IP innovation ecosystem, and how you see the chatbot being useful in your work.
Well, thank you, Professor, for the kind introduction and for not raising expectations. Let me start off by thanking Pina for your leadership in this area and to bring together such an esteemed panel to talk about such an important issue. So thank you for that, and I appreciate the invitation. I'm going to try to put a slide on screen. So do tell me if you see it. First of all, CIPO is the administrator of IP in Canada. Most IP, of course, as you know, is global in nature. So we do a lot of work internationally. We have about 120,000 applications per year. And we have about 800,000 pieces of IP in force. So in an average year, we have about 1 million interactions with innovators, businesses, creators in the marketplace. So what we do and how we do it affects innovation. Before we get started, navigating the IP ecosystem, I worked with a think tank in November of last year with 12 other IP offices, and we tried to map out how many different players are there in the IP ecosystem. So here you have a stylized map. It's not perfect, it's not comprehensive, and definitely the bundles are not mutually exclusive. But you can see there are many people across the ecosystem who all have a piece of the IP puzzle. From researchers on the far left, a number of government agencies, IP professionals, CIPO is in the IP office area, and then ultimately getting to the marketplace itself, IP traders, licensors, and then ultimately the market. First and foremost in the ecosystem are the businesses, the innovators, creators, and central, let's not forget about the public interest itself and consumers and third parties. So we tried to sketch this out. You can see the IP ecosystem is vast, it's complex. This chart puts it together in a tidy picture. We know that the IP ecosystem is not tidy, it is messy, just as innovation is messy. So what would a chatbot do? What I hope it would do is help the innovator, the businesses, navigate all of these different players in the system eventually to get to market effectively. So I'll just leave it at that and turn it back to you, Professor Weber.
Thank you so much. I'm getting some questions on the Q&A. Thank you very much for that. What I would propose to do is to leave them towards the end and deal with them then, so that we have time for the general presentations. Two really good questions already there. So thank you for that. I will now move over to Claudia Kreviak, who is the President and CEO of the Ontario Centres of Excellence, and ask her to say something about her organisation and how you fit into the IP innovation ecosystem, and or how the chatbot may work for you. I'm sure you'll give an excellent answer.
Thank you, Professor Weber. At the Ontario Centre of Innovation, we've just recently rebranded. We have been around for over 30 years in Ontario, working very closely with the Ontario government to accelerate innovation in Ontario. And a few months ago, we rebranded to the Ontario Centre of Innovation to better focus our name on the work that we actually do. What we do is we develop and deliver programs that accelerate the development, the commercialization, and the adoption of new technologies to drive job creation. What that means is we support collaborative R&D projects between industry and academia. We provide seed financing to tech startups to de-risk opportunities at a very early stage. We support technology pilots and demonstration projects. We put together business-led innovation networks focused on emerging technology areas such as AI, 5G, connected and autonomous vehicles, among others. And what I like to say is accelerating the commercialization of Made in Ontario IP has always been in our DNA. And we're very excited about the chatbot. We work with hundreds of startups, entrepreneurs, and innovators across the province, and especially at the early stage in their commercialization or entrepreneurship journeys. And many of them have the same questions, I think, that's been mentioned before. And the chatbot is an incredibly powerful tool because it provides an opportunity for entrepreneurs and those that are commercializing their innovations as they're starting out to get answers to questions that they need in a very timely way, in a way that is very easily accessible. So we're very, very excited to be able to have a resource in Ontario's IP, an innovation ecosystem such as the chatbot, and we will certainly be promoting it and encouraging entrepreneurs and startups across the province to access it.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Jennifer Miller, who is the Director General of the Marketplace Framework Policy Branch at federal government, at the federal government department called Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. Used to be once just called Industry Canada, but we've moved beyond industry now into Innovation, Science and Economic Development. So that's a massive portfolio for you, Jennifer. So I'd be very interested to hear your comments on this particular subject.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Weber, and thanks very much for inviting me here today. I'm very, very pleased to take part in this Innovation Clinic Chatbot launch event. It's a great afternoon and a really cool demonstration of the technology so far. So yes, I am Jennifer Miller. I am the Director General of Marketplace Framework Policy Branch at the department formerly known as Industry Canada. So as part of that mandate, my branch is responsible for the development of coordination of policies, laws, regulations in all the areas of intellectual property. So patent, copyright, trademarks, industrial design, as well as some other stuff like corporate and insolvency law, foreign investment, competition, privacy, and data protection. So basically developing and coordinating those policies is a core function of the department and of my team's time. Basically, our job is to support the department and the government's priorities by making sure that Canada's marketplace frameworks help promote competitive markets and instill consumer confidence. And clearly, IP is central to that. I think in our department, we consider IP a key component, increasingly key component too, of the innovation economy. And we are pretty proud of the progress that we've made so far on the national IP strategy, which was launched 3 years ago. So the IP strategy features improvements in IP legislation, IP awareness, education and advice, as well as the development of strategic IP tools. And all of that is basically designed to work together with a view to helping Canadian innovators maximize the value of their creations and enhance further innovation. So that's really the goal. As part of the IP awareness, education, and advice pillar that I just mentioned, which is kind of a mouthful, ISED launched the IP Legal Clinics program. So as you all will know, that's a grant program intended to encourage the establishment or enhancement of IP legal clinics within Canadian law schools. And since its launch, we've been able to provide funding to 6 university law schools, including IP Osgoode. So that's something we're always keen to follow your work. We're super happy to see that the funding provided under the IP Legal Clinics program is resulting in exciting new concrete projects like this first AI-backed Innovation Clinic Chatbot, which is really, really neat to see. We think that projects like this really directly support the objectives of our program, provide really great direct support to innovators, and really give the law schools another tool in the toolbox to advance their mandates as well. So all the way around, it's a fantastic development, and we look forward to supporting its further development in any way we can.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, it's nice always to see the fruit of your endeavour coming ripe. I think now I'll just ask another question, but more directed to all the panel, unless they want to chip in. We'll go directly to Nikita and Maya on this one, but let's start with you, Nikita. In your experience, how important is it to secure the IP at an early stage for an early stage company? And do you see that whether there are any pitfalls that something like the chatbot would help you overcome?
Yeah, so for early stage companies, it's one of those extremely important things that is not necessarily urgent. So there is definitely a pitfall that it can fall by the wayside simply because it doesn't contribute to immediate goals of like within the next 6 to 12 months. It largely does not like contribute to revenue. It doesn't contribute to like adding value to your customers. So it's very difficult to kind of allocate those kind of resources in terms of doing it. So I know some entrepreneurs can like kind of do it, and having access to programs like this can definitely help really very much bridge the gap. And there was like a second part to your question.
Well, I guess you've really answered it in globally, because I was just curious whether how the chatbot might help you get there. And I guess you're talking about upfront costs, which you want to avoid as much as possible. You want to get on with the business of making your product and getting it ready for market. But I guess you were helped this time through, fortunately, through the facilities of the university, through the engineering school and the Innovation Clinic, but I'm just wondering about innovators who are without that sort of backing. Do you see yourself as one of those innovators being helped by something like the chatbot to at least avoid some of your costs and get you going?
Yeah, it would definitely help bridge the gap in terms of the early days, especially because it's something that was actually very instrumental in terms of us closing our most recent funding round. We only kind of found out after the fact how instrumental it was, but the fact that we actually had a patent under our belt was the reason we were able to like justify and able to secure this amount of funding. So it's one of those things where it's like in the early days, you don't have the means to like invest into it, but later on, the value that something like that brings compounds so much that it's something that I would very much highly recommend looking into, especially in the early days, because as your company grows, if you are successful, it is such a value add that emerges much later in the company. And it's programs like this that can essentially help you leapfrog in terms of your understanding and how you go about navigating this. That's where the real value definitely lies in something like this.
Thank you, Nikita. Maya, you've had obviously a lot of experience in dealing with IP and startups. What sort of experience have you had with them? You folks sort of trot into your office to say, "Hi, I'm an early startup. What do I do now? I've got the thing here, waving a model at you. I've told all my friends about it. Is that okay?"
Well, not necessarily telling anybody about it is not necessarily okay, but there are grace periods for that. But I do think it's important for early stage companies to identify those IP assets early, because they're usually the first assets of the company. It's the intellectual capital of its people and how they're transferring that from the inventors and authors into corporate assets. So it's important to identify those assets, figure out the inventors and authors, and make sure that there's clear chain of title between those authors or creators and the company that's intending to own those assets. And so that's usually something that's a key early stage as well. You don't want to have to fix that later on. And also filing registrations for those core assets is an important practice to get everybody in the habit of identifying the creators and ensuring that there is that documentation showing a chain of title, and then enables Nikita to then leverage those assets to build his business out. And I think Nikita is a great example of how early stage companies can look at the ecosystem. Him and his team were so engaged in the process. Whenever there was documents to review, they would review and comment, and that engagement was key for their success. And also, I think the chatbot can support that by providing more IP knowledge to those innovators and applicants to sort of get their knowledge up, and so that they're more engaged with their experts, and then keeps costs overall down. And also just you get a better product at the end, a better work product. And so the chatbot hopefully will help navigate that large amount of data out there to get that good knowledge to those innovators early on, to help bridge those and make those costs low, because of course patents are expensive, but important.
Thank you, Maya. That's great. I wanted to look perhaps now at the larger picture, go from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, through to something more global now, and just perhaps start with Konstantinos, perhaps indicating to us what he knows about the latest economic trends relating to IP, its growth globally, and what role he sees from his perspective IP playing in economic growth.
Thank you, Professor. One thing that has been quite impressive is to see, even during a time of pandemic, that innovation continues, and we see the live applications coming through our front door. And clearly innovators, businesses continue to work hard. We've seen a surge internationally in IP filings. and a lot of it is being driven now by different geopolitical regions. China is coming out very strong. One important shift we've seen over the last 30 years or so, Ocean Tomo does some research on the value of Standard & Poor 500 companies, and 30, 40 years ago, about 80% or so of the value of companies was in machinery, equipment, plant. Presently, 90% of the value of S&P 500 companies is represented in intangible assets: research, brand, design, goodwill. So there's been this shift in terms of the value. So what tools are out there to support these companies to protect such a large proportion of their business? And of course, IP provides some of those tools, whether formal IP, patent, trademark, industrial design, or informal trade secrets, confidential information. We have done some surveys as well that shows companies that do use intellectual property are more likely to grow, more likely to export and invest. One important factor, though, is we know that causation does not equal, or rather correlation does not equal causation. So the types of questions we get many times is, how do I proceed to develop an IP strategy? So it's not just getting your IP, but how does it fit into the broader business strategy? What does it mean for my business? How am I going to use it? How am I going to protect it, lease it, and compete globally? So you can see the shift in IP activity, the shift in intangible value of companies, and the continued use of IP tools and rights to help support companies in their growth plans.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, this is a sort of question which I think former Industry Canada would be very, very much involved in, looking at global trends and seeing how Canada can lead them or be involved in them. So, Jennifer, could you say something about what you see about IP worldwide?
Sure, yeah, no, and this is an area where perhaps unsurprisingly, Konstantinos and I share a lot of the same views and are quite well aligned on the thinking of the importance of IP and strategic IP use to Canadian companies. I think, I might take a slightly different tack in my answer and just say that, I think the case for investing in and strategically using IP, I think, is quite clear based on the types of factors that Konstantinos was outlining. I think that there are other, when we're looking at how Canada positions itself and how we choose to position our innovation strategy overall, when we look at comparator countries, I think there is also an area where IP and intangible assets are taking on increasing importance, because I think if you look at kind of the way that governments have positioned economic strategies historically, we see that there's always been traditionally a lot of reliance on, okay, well, how do we talk about our resource industries? How do we talk about our traditional industries? And the great thing, I think, from an innovation policy perspective is that over the past years, we've certainly seen, and I'm talking sort of 10, 15 years, I think we've seen an increasing shift towards talking about innovation in and of itself, which sometimes but not always correlates to digital, and talking about innovation in those traditional industries, which I think is becoming increasingly the Canadian brand, relying on those intangibles, relying on the generation and strategic use of IP to actually, I think, differentiate Canada. We're not just a place with things you can pull out of the ground. We are a place that really maximizes the value of that IP across industries, and so that's been, I think, an important priority for successive governments across parties. I think the challenge to that or in taking that kind of approach is then, for policymakers, we have to think about how to make something that is in fact intangible, quite tangible for Canadian business. So, much like, if you're pushing automation because it has amazing benefits for, let's say the manufacturing sector, you want to make sure that if people are out there buying robots, they know what to do with those robots, that they actually contribute to business growth strategies and improve productivity and bottom lines. And the same goes for IP, which is where the IP strategy has really come in. We want companies to, know what they have. We want the conditions for them to be able to use it strategically in Canada and abroad to be right. And we want to be able to support them in the goals that work best for their firm. So I think that offers us a lot of opportunities, especially in a post-pandemic context, but it also points to the importance of really making those links with companies and entrepreneurs who want to use that IP strategically.
I suppose too that one of the important things was to leave innovators space to innovate without falling over IP unnecessarily as well. I mean, we've been talking very much about getting IP, but one of the things, of course, that one has to watch out for is that you don't have a situation where there's so much IP around that potentially obstructs innovation, I wonder whether how the department views that aspect of IP.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting question too. And I mean, I think that that just generally speaking, I would say that obviously understanding and awareness is important. So you can understand, kind of what's out there, what helps you operate, what might prevent you from operating, how you use what you have, how you position yourself in relation to others. I mean, it's more, I think, looking at the IP strategy about understanding that total landscape as a first step.
Good, thank you very much. Well, Claudia, I'd very much like to hear your perspective on how you see IP and economic growth from your perspective in the Ontario centres.
Absolutely. So IP is increasingly becoming one of the most important dimensions of the global economy. There's a generation of scientific knowledge, innovation, and IP that is steadily rising in economies across the world. And if you look at large firms, especially large multinational firms, they're really capitalizing on that trend. And I kind of like to use an example to demonstrate this point that is very current. So Amazon is one of the world's largest holders of not just patents, but patent families as well. And if you now look to kind of a Canadian example to Amazon's Goliath, then our David to Amazon's Goliath is Shopify, and Shopify only relatively recently has started focusing on its IP strategy and IP portfolio, and that wasn't necessarily a focus in the early days. And so it'll be very interesting to see if Amazon and Shopify do go head to head, what role IP and IP strategy will play. The reality, though, is upwards of 90% of large businesses and certainly multinationals own at least one form of intellectual property, and they're really capitalizing on this trend. Unfortunately, that number is significantly lower for small businesses and especially emerging businesses and startups. And so we all recognize the importance of IP in the intangibles economy, and I think the onus is on all of us, given that we're all working in the innovation sector, and we're all working with entrepreneurs and innovators and researchers. And if Canada is truly to have a competitive advantage in the global economy, IP is important, and it is especially important for SMEs.
Thank you very much. I have quite a few questions here I wanted to put to you all, but time is getting on a bit, and I'd like to maybe just jump out of the order that I was going to do and go to something which I think is on the minds of many people when they come across the issues of IP, and that's how accessible this whole IP system is to Canadians, and particularly Canadians who are not particularly well represented in it at the moment. We have studies dealing with that indicate that women and Indigenous people really aren't taking much advantage of the IP system, and it's not clear whether it's a knowledge thing or is it a barrier thing or in the system. I wondered whether, perhaps I'll put this question to Prof. D'Agostino. What is the perspective here, looking at IP and its how it plays out in the equity, diversity, inclusion framework that we like to look at services and accessibility from? Pina?
Thank you, Professor Weber. Yes, so for me, it's a question that really has always preoccupied me and is really consuming me now. I think it's something that merits so much more thinking and action, the courage of action, which we need more of that. It's for women and the Indigenous communities, and we've organized a bunch of events even exploring these issues. It's very difficult. It's widespread knowledge that there's an abject lack of representation, especially in the traditional scientific disciplines, and that then filters up, right? If you don't have women from the grassroots that are able to innovate, then you're not going to get them getting a patent, let's say, as an example. Also, the boardrooms of innovation are still largely male, and that needs to change. And just the other day there was something in the Globe, like there's every day we're getting a flurry of this stuff. There is such an aching for action. So for sure we need to collect these metrics, get an evidence-based approach, but we need to act. As an educator, I love to discuss these issues and study them, but it's time for action. And at IP Osgoode, we've organized, as I mentioned, like one conference, which to me pointed to the fact that we needed to think about this a lot more. And this was actually we partnered with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, and it was just an incredible atmosphere because you had a lot of women in the room aching to express themselves and to say how hard it is for them to innovate and to be in this space, which has been largely, locking them out of it. So that to me shows that, if they can't even start up, now we're talking about scaling up. Well, you need to help them from the very bottom. And one thing that, again, trying to roll up our sleeves, how do we make this happen? In the Innovation Clinic, one thing that I'm proud to say, and we did this along with the university, with Innovation York, is we helped this incredible group of Indigenous youth at the university. And you could even look this up, Google them, Indigenous Friends app. That's something that we were heavily involved in. We did everything from the copyrights to the patents, the employment agreements. We helped them get off the ground. And here it's really a grassroots way to support Indigenous youth and really celebrate their indigeneity in connection with also digital transformation and all the tools available for them. And so we did this just a few years ago, and to me, it's one way that we can tackle this, like each of us from our own spaces, but we need to come more collaboratively together, and courage is really the word that I would like us to take home here.
Well, I think I'd like to just hear something from those at the coalface, although that's perhaps the non-fossil fuel face. Konstantinos, how do you see this playing out from your perspective?
Very, very important question. For me, the bottom line is there are 7 billion people in the world. That is a finite amount of brains. We should make use of, all the brain power we have to address the key challenges we're all facing. We've actually done some gender-based analysis at CIPO, working with the World Intellectual Property Organization. They do have a database that identifies probable gender based on names of patent applicants. And what we have found is on the patent side that the applicants, 14% are female. So that's quite striking when you see it, when you see the final average. The baseline, unfortunately, is very similar in other jurisdictions. It is in the 14 to 16%. What's particularly concerning here is that Canada started at a stronger point about 10 to 15 years ago, and it has been going down. It's gone down about 2%. So when you look at the overall averages and trends, it does raise some very important questions. And as Pina mentioned, how do you step back and look at the entire system? So this is what we see coming through our front door. But what does the community look like? What does the professional community look like in IP? What do the researchers look like? How does it go right back to students? So we can see that full path, if you will. So I just provided a snapshot of what comes through our front door. But I think there are challenges along the way.
Thank you. Jennifer, maybe, as I said, done any work on this, and do you have any views about the whole problem of minority representation in the IP system at the service industry level, at the level of the federal government serving, as well as people getting involved in the IP system itself? Are there barriers that are facing them, and are there ways in which they can be overcome if they are?
Oh, yeah, you bet. Lots of thoughts on this. I mean, I guess I'm just sort of thinking about an example from my previous work on innovation clusters, where you know, there was a session at the kind of global cluster conference that we were at about, you know, okay, what can we do to get more women involved in cluster management? And you know, I was really struck by, you know, of course, it was another example of where, you know, a lot of the people speaking on the subject were men. And so that's kind of a tough place to start from the get-go. But a lot of the initiatives were around, okay, well, how do you know, like they were saying about things like, oh, well, we include women in our beer nights, or we, like, that was literally an example that was provided. You know, we're really cognizant of, you know, that kind of thing. And I was thinking about, you know, that it doesn't do anything to address any of the problems of, you know, where do women come in terms of the design of these initiatives, being community leaders to get clusters together, having the industry connections to be able to support them, you know, actually founding and growing them. Like, that does nothing about the pipeline. And you know, I'm kind of struck. I use that example because on the IP front, one of the areas that we have been looking at through the IP strategy has been Indigenous IP, particularly. And you know, the question that really is stuck in my mind when we look at Indigenous IP is not, you know, how do we make the IP system, how do we bring more Indigenous innovators into the system, or how do we increase the number of Indigenous IP holders or anything like that? It's actually more fundamental about, well, how do you reconcile traditional systems of knowledge with a system that's set up on a very, very different basis? And how do you actually achieve the same, you know, goals that we want out of the traditional IP system in a way that actually starts from an Indigenous perspective and could end up looking very, very different? You know, somewhere we have to square the circle between, I think, the traditional policy methods we have, like we're doing an IP awareness and use survey that focuses on Indigenous innovators, IP users, all that kind of thing. But that's only going to get us so far. I mean, I think that the bigger challenges are still really in front of us as we look at how these systems do not accommodate everybody. And then what do you do when you have something like the law that you need to make work on the one hand, but address these fundamental problems in a way that really, you know, in a way that really speaks to the true need on the other. So that's it's not an easy answer. I can't say we've got something rolling out in, you know, March 2021, but it's definitely a long conversation that needs to, you know, that needs to be undertaken on the policy side for sure.
Claudia, do you have any views on this that you Claudia?
Thank you. So I very violently agree with everything that Pina, Konstantinos, and Jennifer have said. What I'd like to highlight is why this matters. And this matters not simply from the perspective of it's the right thing to do. And by the way, this is the right thing to do. And not only from the perspective of fairness in terms of equality and representation, which this is an issue of fairness and equality and representation, but this also matters because it is the smart and competitive thing for Canada to do for its economy. And I just want to provide some statistics. The first set of numbers come from a fantastic startup company called Diversio. They're based in Toronto, and they have amazing tools that help both small and large companies address EDI in their businesses. And so their data shows that hiring women and people from racialized groups translates into an average of 3 to 8% revenue increase for tech companies. I sit on the boards of small and large companies, and if you told me that you can guarantee that you could increase the revenue of a company by 8%, I'd be like, absolutely, what do we need to do? The answer is simple, EDI. Another statistic, failure to act could cause companies to lose not only 30% of talent, but up to 7% of market capitalization. So again, this goes back to business. And then just the final stat that I'd like to put out there in terms of why this matters and why this is the smart and right thing for Canada to do. It's from a BCG diversity and innovation survey that was done a couple of years ago. And they surveyed thousands of companies globally. And what they found was that companies with more diverse leadership teams reported higher innovation revenue by a significant margin. So if Canada wants to lead in the intangibles economy, if we want to be a leader in the commercialization of IP and we want to build IP-rich companies, we need to address EDI. If we do not address EDI, we're not going to have a competitive advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking at it in economic terms, it's really dumb that you have a situation where there are barriers put in front of people who have the talent and ability to do things and really tripping over things that shouldn't be there for them. And as I say, it's not just equity is often pretty good economics, and here I think it is. I wonder just, Maya, if you had any views on this, just looking from the perspective of servicing the startups or inventors, equally looking at it from the point of view of how many groups that we would call, well, not we talk about women as a minority group, for goodness sake, but groups that are traditionally not part of the legal service industry. How are we doing there? How many do we have? A lot of IP women lawyers around? Do we have a lot of Indigenous IP lawyers around? Do we have a lot of racialized IP lawyers around? How do we do that? And does it really matter?
Mm-hmm. I think it absolutely matters. There's not a lot. I mean, I'm fortunate to work at Norton Rose, where we have a lot of leadership, female leadership on the IP side, and had that historically. So I'm fortunate from that position, definitely. But I think not only do I see it in legal services, but also that intersection with AI technology, and also seeing the importance of looking at EDI from a technology development perspective and design. And you actually result in a better quality technology product if you ensure you've got a diverse team. And I'm speaking to issues around data, for example. We all know data sets aren't created equal. So if you have a diverse team looking at the data sets, you results often in a better quality data set that doesn't have as much bias in it, for example, or blind spots around potential bias areas. So seeing a better technology product as a result. So that's another economic driver to ensure you're looking at that diverse team. We're also seeing some startups, actively noticing that and thinking of creative ways to get diversity. So if they can't necessarily hire a ton of people, how can they share workspace? Well, I mean, it's a little different now, but how can you engage others that are more diverse to help contribute to your product design and development? So definitely seeing that in the AI space as well, and encouraging diverse teams to help build the better products. And that's where ultimately the IP assets will flow from that as well. And you have better IP assets when you're looking at these issues.
Yeah, better assets and more diverse assets give you the whole range of outputs that people are capable of. I think that we end up having a narrow set of outputs as soon as you start putting barriers up in front of people to put their knowledge and talents to work and out there.
Exactly, or an automated decision.
Yeah. Let's just shift gear a little bit and look at the question of where Canada fits in with the world here. We know that a lot of IP or a lot of innovation happens in Canada, and a lot of it then starts floating away out of Canada. And we have, of course, a neighbor to the south, which is 10 times our size and in population terms, for obviously not in territory terms. We always have that on top of them. But in terms of a market, it's obviously an attractive market. And what can we do to attract Canadians to look at Canada first instead of wandering off down south with their product and getting it commercialized there? Are there ways to that will encourage Canadianization of Canadian innovation more than is occurring now? I guess that's a good question to put to Nikita, because he's there. He's busy innovating. I'm sure there's an enormous market down south for what you're doing and elsewhere around the world. But how about Canada?
Definitely. A lot of great questions there. So initially we were actually looking in San Francisco when we were trying to get this funding round together. And through a series of connections, this round actually largely came out to being Canadian. Majority of this funding round was from Canadian investors. And that is one of the like bigger challenges in terms of like growing and scaling a company here in Canada, is getting access to like those kind of larger funds that can take larger size bets. And the Canadian ecosystem has really kind of come together over the past several years. We were very grateful to be introduced to BDC's Industrial Innovation Venture Fund, who led this round. It was a new fund just assembled last year. And funds like these like really help Canadian tech stay and grow in Canada. And additionally, there are a lot of different programs that are available to us uniquely in Canada that are not available in the States. Early on in our startup kind of mode, we went through now OCI's, back then it was OCE, the Smart Start program, and that was like very instrumental seed stage capital at that high risk category when investors are very skittish, and having that kind of early stage backing really helps, not only build the foundation out in Canada, but as you build out your technology, your team, there are different programs to expand into from there as well. The Canadian ecosystem in terms of building and scaling a startup here has really come together over the past several years, and I hope it will continue to do so. And I will try to do my part in terms of helping other entrepreneurs navigate this as well.
Thanks, Nikita. I can see Jennifer itching to say something here. Sounds very much the centerpiece of the IP strategy in many ways. It all sort of comes back to this, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, no, and I was so glad to hear Nikita talking about some of the different programs and supports that he had relied on, because I think this as you've correctly pointed out, I am itching to talk about it because it is really our department's bread and butter. Trying to figure out what are the conditions that Canadian companies need to start up, to grow, to scale up in Canada, and this is where the IP strategy is actually in some ways a little bit of an outlier, because I mean, if you look at the continuum, you need everything from smooth supports for incorporation. What do you need to know to get a business off the ground? A lot of this, by the way, obviously together with provincial partners, because not all of this is federal jurisdiction, but just thinking about, what is the universe of funding out there? What is the universe of advice out there? What types of networks exist in other countries that we might need to support the development of in Canada, that provide that kind of that invaluable advice and support to businesses, all of those things. But the IP strategy, I just want to point out, although we are hoping that Canadian companies obviously develop IP, figure out strategic ways to use it here, it isn't geared to a particular outcome of keeping IP in Canada. I think if you're talking about strategic use of IP towards growing a successful business and actually therefore contributing to our innovation objectives for Canada, that means that you know what you've got, you know how to use it, you know how to protect it, how to use it abroad, like not just to keep it here, because sometimes that isn't the route to, getting the funds you need, that isn't the route to disseminating your innovation. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. So it's a pretty, I think, a pretty complex question. And at the end of the day, if IP and supports for IP are an important part of Canadian businesses accomplishing their objectives in Canada, then that's really the sweet spot for us. But it does sometimes include that international component as well.
Claudia, yes, I was just going to ask Claudia, and then I'll come back to you, Konstantinos. How do you put an Ontario innovator down into Ontario? Claudia,
sure. So I think, unfortunately, Canada does lose its disproportionate share of very high potential companies at an early stage to the US, and it's a tough problem to solve. And typically, in our experience, at the early stage, they go down for one of two reasons: either access to capital, and Nikita spoke to some of the good things that are happening here that can help offset that. The other thing is that's where their first customers often are. So if you're an early stage company that's just starting out, and I'll use the example of the health sector, health tech sector as one example, but this happens in other sectors as well. Many of the early stage health tech companies that we work with, they will tell us it is so difficult for them to break in into the public healthcare system in Ontario or in Canada, and often their early adopters and first customers are south of the border. And if you're at an early stage where it's still easy to pick up the company because it's not sticky, it doesn't have roots, and you find that your first customers are in south of the border, it just starts to make sense to be closer to your customers, and that's why we sometimes end up losing companies. So one of the things I think we can do that is critical is looking at programs and incentives to ensure that the public sector becomes a first customer or an early adopter of many of these innovations that are developed here, whether it is the healthcare sector, the education sector, or government itself, because I think that's one of the things that could help very much at the early stage. Because again, they leave either because of capital or that's where their first customers are. So let's ensure those first customers are here, because the other benefit of this is bringing new innovations into our public sector, into our healthcare sector, into our education sector, among other, and into government is a really good thing of its own, aside from the fact that it's going to help keep some of these companies here as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. That's terrific. And of course, Konstantinos, I thought you might have something to say on this one. After you.
Thanks, Professor. First of all, I'm very encouraged to hear of Nikita's experience in being able to find the investment here and create a foothold in Canada. That's critical. This is a fundamental question, right? You know, by definition, innovation, to be truly innovative, must be globally innovative. Therefore, you know, we need to protect our IP wherever we wish to grow that market. The reality is 87% of the patent applications in Canada come from outside of Canada. Likewise, 2/3 of Canadians will file outside of Canada for their IP protection. So that's a signal that we really are operating on a global platform. And we need to create the mechanisms to ensure that Canadians can avail themselves of that. Of course, there are fundamental questions here. To what extent does you know, seeking venture capital or IP rights abroad eventually lead to a brain drain? We hear, you know, arguments, some people musing about IP as industrial policy. I think the question is to keep them in Canada. So, I mean, these are fundamental questions that you know, we need to understand, you know, what the true dynamics are in the marketplace. We've done two things at CIPO. We continue to harmonize globally. We joined 5 international treaties in the last 2 years, and that ultimately reduces the friction of Canadians wanting to operate globally, which is a choice that helps level the playing field with their international competitors. So that's a good thing. It's a very neoliberal way of looking at things, and how do you try to ensure that you have good people like Nikita staying in Canada and creating that footprint? Another initiative we have here, we've introduced guides for seeking IP globally, and the jurisdictions are not the same. The competitive forces are not the same. The cultural views of IP are not the same globally. So we help for those who are seeking IP abroad, give them the information they need so that they can enter markets with eyes wide open.
I'm conscious of the time, and we could talk forever on this. This is wonderful stuff. But what I might do now is just go to the couple of questions that we've got here, which I think are two really good questions. The first one is from Walid Khan, and it's really a question asking, how do we guarantee that what information comes off the chatbot is good, correct, and isn't sort of information that's going to make Nikita grab one of his drones and fly off? Perhaps Maya, is this a good question to ask
Sure.
you?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that, Professor Weaver. So what we did is we made sure we looked to credible sources like CIPO and WIPO. So not only did we use good quality data, we also use data that we could actually use without risk within the chatbot. So those are great resources. We did use a questionable book by a Professor Weaver, so we're not sure on the credibility of that source, but we're hoping it's going to be okay.
Dangerous stuff.
So we're just working with the students and really focusing on the concepts. So we're distilling these credible sources down into concepts and then linking them to the actual source, just making sure to keep the process transparent, and you can get lost in the web of links, of course, too.
Thank you. That's terrific, guys. Especially enjoyed the backhanded plug. A good question from Professor Sean Rehag of Osgoode, which I can summarize it in this way. Since the chatbox, I think chatbot is, I'm sorry I keep saying chatbox. Once you get it in your head, it's hard to fall out. It's a bad play on chatterbox, isn't it? But a new portmanteau. But I like the chatbot. I was going to actually ask sometime if we ever managed to trademark it, but I'm sure that's another question. But it does lead into Professor Rehag's question, which is, this has been developed within a university. And what are we doing about making it freely accessible to others? Is the data being treated as proprietary? or are we making it easy for people to link up and use it? He makes, of course, the point that we are a publicly funded university and we have special duties to disseminate widely and deeply and preferably freely. So I guess this is a question I could put to Professor D'Agostino. How would you answer, Professor Rehag?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and something that actually Maya and I talked about from the very beginning when we were putting the chatbot together. And I think it flows from a lot of what she already said in curating the information, which is already publicly available. We wanted to ensure that we kept the same publicly available nature of it. I mean, we are in a university, and that goes with actually any initiative within the university. And the happy trend that I see is that more and more information and data and resources are more accessible. And that's the whole point of the chatbot. There's, we don't want to lock it up and make it proprietary. We want it to have the greatest reach and accessibility as possible. And if others even want to make their own chatbot, why not? We can help them do that. Maya mentioned also in earlier remarks about Creative Commons licenses. So there are licensing arrangements that we can have in place that ensure the greatest access to this. Now, this could even link back to something we were talking about in EDI. Access is key, and the chatbot is also a way to equalize the playing field for those communities that are in a sense alienated because they're not on that equal playing field. So it has the reach into indigenous communities and for a lot of women that maybe are not, in the circles of power or those boardrooms. So this is one grounding step to make that happen. But for sure, I welcome the question, and we're all of the same minds when we were creating it. Accessibility is key, and it's something that we're going to be really attuned to, going back also to what Maya talked about, the data, and ensuring that we have good data also that goes in and out.
And just taking it one step further from that, of course, the chatbot at the moment is in English, and I wondered whether we were thinking of, as it develops, including other languages, not just the other official language. Of course, that would be a priority, but also perhaps indigenous languages and also languages that are commonly spoken by Canadians who don't find either English or French or Inuit a comfortable language for them to speak in.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in, but it's something that we had also talked about. Like French was the first that we thought about having it, a French version of it, but we thought, let's roll up our sleeves. We'll start somewhere with the English and then look to other possibilities. Of course, again, and it goes back to access and making it, if someone is not able to read the answers, then it's of no use to them, right? So by no means we want to make this just all English, but we're building there. And here, this is a really great opportunity for all of you in the audience. If you have other ideas or thoughts of things you'd like to see us do in the chatbot, like this is just ground zero here. We're just starting out. We're all ears.
Yeah, and I guess it would be you'd have also other aspects of accessibility there for people who aren't comfortable using keyboards or are not well sighted and so forth, making it more fully accessible to every Canadian.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Time, unless I'm working on the wrong time zone here. I am, of course, in the UK at the moment, so I'm having to minus 5 hours off everything that I see on my screen. I suspect I may be coming towards the end of our allotted time here. So if that's so, can I say this? Thank you very much, all of you, for answering so frankly and succinctly, and even questions that weren't necessarily ones that you'd thought were forthcoming. But that's the fun of a panel discussion. So thank you very much. I think that was very informative. It's a great event to have centered around the chatbot, and that we look at that as one of the central things that we were doing, of course. But of course, it's just one little cog in the large IP stratosphere, and as the discussion indicated, there are lots of issues that still need to be addressed as we go forward. So maybe thank you very much, all of you, and I'll send it. I'll take it back to Prof. D'Agostino.
All right, well, I'll continue on the note of thanks. Thank you, Professor Weber, for an excellent job in moderating and in keeping the time. And thanks to all of you in the audience, we did it. You launched with us today during a pandemic, and we couldn't be happier. Thank you for really taking the time out of your screen-filled days to join our own screen here and be with us for this really important event, which as you saw, there was a lot of hard work and a lot of heart that was behind it all. So we're very grateful for that. A big thanks to our distinguished panelists, Maya, Nikita, Konstantinos, Claudia, and Jennifer, for all of your expert thinking and all the work that you will continue to do even after the session. And I know your inboxes are waiting for you. Ryan and Al and Emma and Ashley, thank you for leading the chatbot demo and all the behind the scenes that you've also done to make today possible. Our gratitude goes to VPRI, Dr. Amir Asif. Really, he's one of the leaders at the top, and in delivering his welcoming remarks from the university meant a lot to us. To Dr. Terry Sachlos, all I could say is keep bringing those amazing students so we could have more success stories like Nikita. And again, if we'd be live, we'd be all clapping so much more now. And usually what we do during our IP Osgoode events is that we like to give a small token of appreciation to our panelists and everyone involved. And given the pandemic, what we thought about, and really given that there's a lot of inequality still in society and just in our backyards, we wanted to make a donation in the speaker's name to the Lawyers Feed the Hungry program. And this is just doing, again, a little thing to help that comes from this initiative that we have. And so now I have some final marching orders for all of you panelists and attendees alike. So please visit ISAC, go on the iposgoode.ca site and ask your questions so that he can be smarter. We want him very smart. We want him to get an A++. Sign up to the Ipigram, our free newsletter, where you could see all that is new and exciting here in IP in Canada and around the world, and also look to our upcoming events. So once a week, we publish all of these, and sign up to that. It's a fun Ipigram, and there you'll also find Bonnie's blog, which is forthcoming. So the conversation, as I like to say, always continues. Don't hesitate also to send clients our way. We are ready, willing, and eager, and our students especially, to help and to really make a difference here, as we did with Nikita. So spread the word of this wonderful program because it's for free. Now, a community is only as strong as its members, and we do need your support. We're always looking for help ourselves in supporting our many programs and our students. So through your ideas in getting involved, if you have any further thinkings on the chatbot, on IP Osgoode, and also if you can contribute in your own way to our cause or know someone who might, please do get in touch. So with that, a big thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you for helping us celebrate and launch ISAC today into the world. Stay well and stay safe.